Here's what happened. I blew $250,000. It was my entire life savings at the time. I then had money from people who trusted me in this too for building out a social media conference back in 2018. I had team members on board. I had volunteers, like I think over 20 volunteers, and there was 500 attendees that came to the event. It was marketers, content creators, founders that were coming together to connect, to collaborate. And externally, it was a win. Like the event actually happened, which is a big win. And then I survived it. That's another big win. Survived it with my health. And then the event got featured in Forbes' list of marketing conferences to check out for that year. But inside, at the time, until I made the decision to be brutally honest, I was destroying my health. And the reason was because one of the main reasons was because of the amount of lying that I was doing leading up to the event itself, then a little bit afterwards to the event, until I made the decision to like be brutally honest and say the hard shit. And it's so easy as you're building the business. And I think about that with messaging for entrepreneurs. It's so easy to pretend in the short term. And there is a lot of benefit to doing that in the short term, of lying, of pretending, of like that you have it all figured out. But in the long term, it's going to catch up to you at some point. And I want to remind you that if you don't have honesty, if you don't have honesty part of building the business, then your body inevitably is going to force you to stop. And I know how much you care about the people around you, care about the impact that you want to make and the difference that you want to make. But that doesn't mean you have to take the weight of the world on your shoulders and this burden on your shoulders. And I will tell you, it's hard to move through that, but it is possible. And I'm here to show you that. This is Make Burnout Extinct. I'm Robert David Weeks. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I know you could be doing a bunch of different stuff, a lot of distractions that are out there. And so we're going to get present, going to do a deep inhale through the nose, going to then release it out through the mouth. You just stretch it out. You can let it out in the sigh too, whatever you're feeling. Because I know you've had a lot of shit and challenges they've dealt with to get to this point where we're at right now. And then you probably got a lot of challenges afterwards you got to deal with. So let's do a deep inhale through the nose. Release it out through the mouth. And out. There we go. Oh, yeah. Welcome back. And then if you're new here, welcome. And if you haven't done it yet, you can subscribe and follow the show for the latest episodes. I got a few commitments for you. First one is to continue to grow this show. So by you subscribing and following, it helps to honor that commitment. And then when I think back, it's been over 8 months now since the launch of the show. And it's been mind-blowing for the growth that's happened. And it would not be possible without your support. So I really do appreciate that. And then the second commitment I have for you is to be honest with you, to prepare you for what to expect from making burnout extinct through my own experience and then through insights that I get from other people, and to be able to share that with you. Because it's not just about these results of feeling more energized, feeling that aliveness of life, feeling the excitement of the momentum towards the vision you have for the business, for your overall quality of life. It's all of that, as well as behind the scenes, the hard work of putting the reps in, of those moments of doubt that can come up, and the shame, the guilt of not, of getting off track, having to honor all those different emotions, the tornado thoughts, the what the fuck am I doing here right now? Honoring all of that, and then continue to move forward and put in those reps. Making burnout extinct includes all of that. And what I want to remind you is that it absolutely is possible for you to make burnout extinct, because it's the simplest ways I can explain it is, one, it's listening to the signals from your body and noticing the message in those signals to then make the changes to your behavior, to your habits. And then with making burnout extinct, what it is having more energizing habits than draining habits in your life. Simplest way I can explain it for how you make burnout extinct. And so thank you for being here, for being a part of the movement. Let's get into it for today. Today, what I want to talk about is this challenge of when it gets really, really hard, how do you show up? It can be easy, and I've done it so many times, so I'm not here to judge. It's so easy to have fear of judgment be in the driver's seat. Judgment of other people, judgment of people closest to you, judgment of yourself. And that can be where lying happens a lot in building the business. And as entrepreneurs, in the short term, there's benefit to lying and pretending. But in the long term, it eventually is going to catch up to you. Because I think of that pretending where you could tell people, hey, yeah, I'm all good. Like, I got everything figured out. Like, I'm all right. I'm going to get by. When in reality, behind scenes, it's a shit show, and help could be great. Or you are mentally and physically exhausted. Being able to acknowledge that rather than ignoring the signals from your body, which I did so much leading up to my burnout after that social media conference. And so I get it. I want to tell you, you're not alone in it. I know how much you care about other people and the impact that you want to make. But that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice then your health in that journey. And what I can tell you is that on the other side of it, as you are able to, instead of making the decision of lying and actually stepping into the being brutally honest, on the other side of that is actually a lot of relief, even though it can be really terrifying right before making that decision. On the other side of it, it can be a moment of feeling more energized, of feeling alive, rather than going through the motions of your day. And even now, as I say it, like, you can feel this intensity in the body of like, oh, like shit. And what I want to remind you is that you are in this battle. It can feel like each day with the burnout beast. For me, it's like this Smeagol looking character inside of me, of the, like, you think about it, for that voice that's inside of you, it's like that Smeagol, like you can't do this, like you gotta lie. And that burnout beast can try to pull you back to your old ways and your old patterns, your old habits. One of them could be lying. And so I do want to let you know that, yeah, it is, there's going to be a lot of resistance that can come up from the body to be honest in certain situations. And a moment comes up for me that I want to get into before that event happened, that I want to really hit home for this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a few different moments where I lied in building this event, and then what happened for me, how I felt for my body sensations. And you may be able to relate to those, because those are then signals from my body that were telling me, hey, make the change, like change it up here. Because if not, you're going to build this exhaustion, and you're going to feel mentally, physically exhausted, and it's going to lead you towards the first red flag of burnout, which is chronic exhaustion. And then it creates that domino effect, and then you're going to hit burnout. And I didn't know it at the time looking back, but that's where it led me. It led me to then hitting burnout. And so I want to share with you those body sensations to recognize, and then some lessons that I learned along the way in lying, and that I'm now taking into this next chapter in building the business for my life, and be building my quality of life that I want. So I got a few of those for you too, that I know you could take into your own life as you're building your business and wanting to create the quality of life that you want for the vision you have for it too. So the story that comes up for me is when it was right after the event. It's where I had to send a email to vendors. What happened was I had business debt, and I had signed contracts where I couldn't pay those contracts that I had signed, or pay the vendors for the contracts I had signed. And so I had to send this email out to them to let them know that I fucked up. And that's literally what I put in the subject line. I fucked up. And it was a decision I had to make, where I either run away from my problems or I own up to what was going on. And I vividly remembered in my body, like, saying, this is the moment where I got to decide how I'm going to be building the business. The business is moving forward. Because what happened was I had to close down this business and then reopened a new one. But it was like that moment to decide, this is like a moment of integrity for me, of like how I'm going to now move forward with my values for building the business. And I remember how terrified I was to send that email, being honest with the situation. It felt like I wasn't going to survive this, right? Is like that intense pressure. I noticed even in the back of my neck, like the tingles and that could come up. And it was all these spidey like these spiders felt like crawling all over my body. But I sent the email out. And then, of course, thinking about it for vendors, you make it a way bigger deal than it is. And it was a terrible situation already, but of course vendors are going to want their money. And so I asked them, hey, can you give me more time to pay it back and figure this out, rather than like having to go into bankruptcy? And so they were open to that, to be able to do it. And I was really grateful for that. But in being honest, I realized how much relief I felt in doing that. And then having to then take on the business debt personally was a way for me to take accountability for my actions and my mistakes. And then looking back, the lesson that I learned was lying can create so many unnecessary mistakes where it can create a lot more of these open stress loops, I call them, where in the body, when you have a challenge that you're dealing with, it can cause an open stress loop where your body gets into a stress response because with a new challenge, it can take it as a perceived threat. And so then you get into that stress response. And what happens is the stress is building in the body and the overwhelm is building in the body until you then close the stress loop. So that stuff can lead to then the chronic stress, which then can lead to chronic inflammation. And you're hitting that first red flag of chronic exhaustion for burnout. And then that creates this domino effect. And so what I realized that I was doing was I created this open stress loop. And what happened was the more mistakes I was making and the more lying I was doing, the bigger the stress loop got because I had no way of closing it out because I had to go with these stories that I was saying. And the example that comes up was a few weeks before the event was going to happen. One of my team members said to me, "Hey, like RD, did you read the contract for the hotel rooms for the speakers?" Because we were having speakers flying in from all different parts of the world, and we had hotel rooms for them for 2 nights. And she was like, "Yeah, did you read it? Because I just got off the phone with the person working at the hotel, our point of contact, and she's telling me that we only have it for 1 night. We don't have it for both nights." And that's where I had the moment of, oh shit, like fuck, I fucked up. And so I remember having to let her know, like, hey, like I fucked this up. But then it was like, okay, well, what's her next action? Because we could tell the speakers what's really going on and the mess up. Or what I was thinking, and then what I ended up doing was I said, hey, no, let's hold off for a little bit to figure out a way to make this right for like spinning it in a different way. Like, let's get into the spinningness and lie and saying a lie here. And so what happened was it was like a little while later on, I had to figure out, okay, well, how the hell am I going to get these speakers into a different hotel? There's no hotel that could take that amount of room or that had that amount of rooms available. And so I was going to have to get support in having these speakers be at different locations, different hotels closer to the venue, which already was a logistical like nightmare to try to figure that out. But then what I ended up doing and talking to my team members, and I ended up taking the accountability and doing it because my team member was like, I'm not going to do this, was telling the speakers that we had a surprise for them where we were going to bring them downtown because the hotel where they were staying after the first night was out of downtown, bringing them downtown, and we're going to have one night where they could spend their time downtown and like spin it as this like cool thing that we're doing for them. And it was funny because one speaker was like super grateful, and then another speaker was like, well, why can't I stay at this other hotel? Like, I'm gonna have all my stuff there. And then another speaker was like, is this bullshit? Like, is it a mistake that you made, or is there some other reason? So I had all of these different conversations now I have to have based off of this one lie that I created. And that became super exhausting and draining and overwhelming. I had to go through and remember what story I was saying to all these different people for their reason, for the reasons, and trying to make it right of like trying to close out those extra stress loops I was creating for myself. And it got to that point where by the start of the event day, I was still trying to figure out how to get the luggage moved to all these other hotels while speakers are coming in and being able to support the attendees. And just if it was to try to create the image, it was like the hair on fire situation, like just moving constantly around, like trying to get one thing done after the next and just getting all these challenges, like figuring out a solution to these challenges I was dealing with. But that was all this extra exhaustion that came from this lie of telling them it was a surprise rather than just being honest of saying this was a mistake we made. I'm so sorry for the trouble that this is going to cause you, but this is what's going on. I'm going to put you in all these different locations and actually working with them. And yes, you're going to have those people that are going to get pissed off and frustrated, but for the majority, people are understanding when you're honest. And that's something to remember with any of these hard decisions that you have to make. That honesty is that people yes, you got to own up for what you did and your accountability. And then at the same time, I think about it, I look at the good in humanity with that, of understanding that we've all lied at some point in our lives, and having to take ownership of that. It's really hard. But then on the other side, there can be a lot of that relief of like, you did it. You actually were able to move through it and you survived this. And so that was a moment for a lesson of learning how much more exhausting it can be and how much more open of these stress loops can happen when you're lying. The other thing for the lesson that I learned in that was when you have a decision in front of you and you know the action that you're going to take, make that decision as fast as possible. Then you do have to have that time to like think it over, and that's important. But once you have clarity as to the direction you're going to move forward for the action, take it. So one, the faster you make the decision, the faster that stress loop can close, and then you can move on to the next challenge that you're having to deal with. The more you put that decision off, and the more then stress builds up in the body and the overwhelm builds up in the body. And your body is like a balloon. Overwhelm and stress, it can handle a certain amount of capacity of that. But then it gets to a point where, like a balloon, if you have no way to release the air out of the balloon's going to pop. And so for the body, you think about that with the stress. If you have no way to release that stress out by making the decision and taking the action and closing that stress loop, then eventually your body's going to hit burnout. And it's already going to be giving you those signals of exhaustion where it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning. Or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're sweating and you're like, what the fuck am I going to do tomorrow? Like it can also be that feeling of emptiness inside, like this body sensation of like, just you feel like a little bit part of your soul is lost because of the lie that you did, or thinking about it for this decision you're putting off. It can feel empty where you feel like you're stuck and you can't move forward. That can also be an empty feeling too. But those are some of the sensations that you can experience along the way. And it's giving yourself grace too, because there are going to be moments where you're going to get off track. But with honesty, the key is to focus on repetition with honesty. When these hard decisions come up and hard days come up, it's being able to honor that there's going to be a lot of resistance here, because with anything new for your body, it can create uncertainty, and that uncertainty can be considered a perceived threat. And so your body can get into a stress response where it can try to pull you back to your old ways and your old habits. And that's where this burnout beast can happen. And so you will naturally have resistance that can come up for making the decision to be honest in whatever the decision is, or whatever the challenges that you're dealing with. And then to show up in that honesty. And so it's honoring the resistance that will come with that, and then realizing you can move through it and you can continue to put the reps in. And once you do that for these different situations, it does become you do build momentum with this. So one of them was lying to the speakers. Another one was lying to my team about how many attendees were coming. At the time, early on, to create momentum, I had said, hey, 2,000 attendees are going to be coming to this event, and I've already signed up. And I shared that with the community. And it was this deep lie already to kick it off, where people were so excited. And now it's like, oh shit, I got to deliver on this number now, which didn't end up happening. And that resulted in having to change venues and making up another lie for why to change venues. And it just created this snowball effect. But by then owning up to the mistake that I made when it came to the vendors, that caused me to go into the opposite direction for the momentum. Where once I was honest in this, then I became honest with the people closest to me, of sharing what was really going on, how exhausted and I was physically and mentally, and sharing the mistakes for the people that had put money into had put money in for supporting this event, sharing with them the situation and the truth, and owning up to that, and gratefully them like there was a lot of grace that was there and realness that was there for conversations. But it then caused me to then really open up more to all these past mistakes and sharing them. And what I felt at the end of this was relief, was an openness and expansiveness in my body. This feeling of the weight on my shoulders was dropped. The waking up in the middle of the night, sweating, of figuring out what the fuck am I going to do, I didn't have those anymore. But what happened was my it did save my health long term, but then I crashed and hit my burnout. And that's where my body was like, nope, you're going to stop here. And that is where then I had to go through this years of recovery, which is something I wouldn't want on anyone because there's so much unnecessary suffering there, of recovering from burnout. And I go back to this quote where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so if you can deal with this beforehand, before hitting your burnout, it's a lot easier to make those changes long term, and a lot easier for continuing to move forward in what it is you're building, for the business, and then what you're building for your quality of life too, for this vision that you have for it. And then overall, thinking back to at the end of this thing, it's reminding yourself that you got to live with yourself and the decisions that you make, and owning up to that. And eventually your body remembers. And then if you don't have honesty, part of your foundation of building the business, your body inevitably will force you to stop at some point and remind you. And so the big lesson that comes up for me with this, to remind you of it, is to be brutally honest with yourself. Brutally honest with where you're at right now in building this business, brutally honest with your skill set of what you're good at, what you're not good at, brutally honest of understanding the signals from your body that are telling you where you're exhausted, where you need more habits that are energizing for you, what are the draining habits, and then brutally honest in your next actions and how to move forward. And understanding that is where you're going to have to honor all the different emotions that could come up, the shame, the guilt, honor the anger that can come up of like, did I just waste so many of these years in the past for lying? It's all of that, having to take all of that on and accepting you for who you are right now, and then accepting that you can move towards who it is you want to become, and go and explore new levels of possibilities for the business and for your life. And what I want to remind you is that where you start isn't going to be where you end up. And so wherever you're at right now, it's temporary. But the other important thing is, whenever you have a moment of honesty, of stepping into that on those hard decisions and being honest and then taking that action, celebrate after you put the rep in, because it is building a habit. And so physically celebrating, I've talked about it before for an important habit, but it's how I do is tap with my shoulders, raise my arms up and go, yeah, like, here we go. Or it could be a head nod, or it could be putting your arm up in the air and be like, all right, fuck yeah, like I just did that. But either way, it reminds the body you want more of this. And that helps you with that momentum of honesty. And then it can be a way for the body to release dopamine, that internal reward, which reinforces that this is something you want. And so then it can become a little bit, doesn't mean it's not going to be hard, but it becomes a little less painful to make that hard decision of being honest. Because again, short term, it can be easy to pretend like you have it all figured out and that everything's going well when it's not. But in the long term, it's going to catch up to you at some point. And I don't want that for you, because I know how much you care about what it is that you're building in this business, the quality of life that you want to create for yourself, for the people closest to you in your life, and the impact that you want to make in this world. And that world could be just your local area, you could think about that bigger scale. But whatever scale it's at, it's such a beautiful gift that you have of that care. But you also want to make sure that you don't sacrifice your health in that level of care. You make sure that you are also optimizing your health along the way. And that comes back to making sure you have habits that are energizing for you rather than draining, and showing up for those. And I will tell you, in the moment, for this habit of honesty, at the beginning, it's going to be terrifying. And it could even be very exhausting, especially if you haven't done, you're going to have to switch your pattern if you've been lying a lot recently for what's going on, of like saying, hey, I'm okay, when I'm really not, or like, I got it all figured out. All right. It can be really exhausting at first, but then after a while, it's realizing how much energy this actually is going to save you, that you can then channel into other areas of the business. And when you are optimizing your health, you can then channel that strength that you feel into these other challenges that you're dealing with. And over time, then that trust builds with the body. You again have that realization your body's on your team. And then you're able to expand that confidence within you to know that you can handle whatever is going to come your way for these challenges, and that you show up at a whole new level for yourself, for the people in your life, and for how you show up to the world. And what I want to tell you, if you haven't heard it yet today, I absolutely believe in you. You have the capabilities here to step into this and to have honesty be a part, to have honesty be part of building the business moving forward. And then where you've made those mistakes, being able to take accountability for yourself in that moment. And it's fucking hard. But then on the other side of that is the relief and the knowing that you can move through this. And then that can open up way more possibilities than you could ever have imagined for your life. And it's remembering that you absolutely got this.